Before we begin, take a moment, breathe in, slowly exhale. If you enjoy this kind of immersive dive into the rough, damp corners of forgotten history, feel free to subscribe or leave a quiet word below, maybe even a candle emoji, fitting for the job you're about to take. Alright, dim the lights, let the world fade, and let's slip softly backward into the stone-cold bones of a medieval English castle. You're not a lord, or a knight, or even the cook. You're something far more essential, the butler. And your day starts well before the first rooster has the courtesy to clear his throat. You don't wake up. You're extracted from sleep, one muscle at a time, on a straw-stuffed mattress that hasn't been rotated since the Feast of St. Cuthbert 3 years ago. Your joints complain like old hinges on a cellar door, and your breath puffs out in little clouds. Yes, it's that cold. Castles are famously drafty, but your chamber is a special kind of miserable, a repurposed storage nook near the kitchens where stone meets mildew and the mice keep their own schedules. You sit up. Your tunic, the one you folded so carefully last night, is now damp with the breath of the walls. Your fingers fumble with the lacing. There's no lamp, just the dim blue-grey seep of pre-dawn light through a slit window barely wide enough to insult a squirrel. You can't see the sun, but you know it's coming. And so are they. Outside your door, the castle stirs. Boots shuffle above you, distant whispers cross stone. Someone coughs wetly down the hall. It's the music of labour, the daily overture of the unseen hands that keep noble life clean, warm, and marvellously unaware. You splash your face with water from a bowl that could just as easily be a bird bath. The chill bites. There's no soap today. The last of the lye was used on your master's undergarments yesterday, and the laundress is still waiting for a new batch to arrive with the next cart from town. You'll just have to rely on friction and prayer. As you step into the corridor, the full bouquet of castle air hits you, a blend of wet stone, wood smoke, grease, damp wool, and something faintly reminiscent of boiled onions and horses. It's not offensive exactly. It's just home. Your boots squelch faintly with each step, not from mud, but from the perpetual condensation that clings to the lower halls. You're headed to the kitchen first, because if you're lucky, the bread hasn't yet gone fully stale, and the hearth might still hold the ghost of yesterday's fire. The cook, a woman named Elspeth with forearms like ham hocks, grunts at your entrance, but tosses you the heel of a loaf and a nod. Luxury. You chew while standing, always standing, watching as she flips oatcakes with a speed that suggests she once played cards with highwaymen. Then you hear it. The bell. Not the chapel bell, not the servant's pull. No, this is the smaller, sharper tone. The guest bell. You freeze. That wasn't supposed to ring today. You glance at Elspeth, who's already scowling. Moments later, young Peter, the page with ears too big for his cap, bursts through the door. He's breathless and pink-cheeked. They arrived in the night, he gasps. 3 guests, unexpected. His lordship said to prepare breakfast. He wants it elegant. Elegant. That word in this context is more curse than request. You swallow dry bread. The stores are thin. The last cart of supplies hasn't arrived, and what little was kept for today was meant to stretch across 2 meals, not impress travelling knights or some minor baron's second cousin. The goose was used yesterday. The apples are going soft, and the wine, gone. Used last night to bribe the local reeve. You glance toward the scullery, cold vegetables, a bit of pickled herring, maybe 2 eggs, a heel of hard cheese that could be used as a weapon. There's barley enough for a thin porridge, if you're lucky, and the rats weren't boiled last night. You feel a knot twist behind your ribs. Anxiety. that faithful companion. You wipe your hands on your apron and turn back to the kitchen, where Elspeth is already muttering curses and rummaging for roots. And as you lift the lid on a battered iron pot, catching a whiff of something once fresh and now vaguely sour, a thought pierces the noise like a sliver of ice. How exactly are you going to serve an elegant breakfast with nothing elegant to serve? You barely have time to think before your feet start moving. You push through the heavy wooden door that groans louder than your knees and step into the belly of the castle, the kitchen. The warmth hits you first, then the smells. Smoke, yeast, animal fat, and something suspiciously burnt form a cocktail that punches your nose without apology. The hearth is roaring, though its glow seems to feed chaos more than comfort. Elspeth is already at the center, wielding a wooden spoon like a general's baton. Her apron is dusted with flour, ash, and perhaps dried soup. It's difficult to tell, and best not to ask. Her voice cuts through the air like a cleaver, barking orders at two half-awake kitchen maids. One is trying to fan the fire. The other is sobbing quietly over a pot of lumpy porridge that smells like last week's accident. Two of them want eggs. Poached, they said, as if hens lay 'em that way straight into the pot. Elspeth grumbles without turning. The third asks for almond bread. Almonds. We're out of salt, let alone nuts. You squeeze through a narrow space between the stacked trays and a shelf of aging onions, nearly tripping over a stray goose feather. The floor is slick with drips of grease and melted tallow. It's barely past dawn, and already the kitchen feels like a battlefront. You breathe in, bad decision, and catch the sour tang of curdled milk mingled with cabbage steam. This is your domain. Not the cooking, no. That's Elspeth's pride. But everything else, the coordination, the timing, the service. You know every cupboard, every cracked dish, every pantry barrel that's been mysteriously lighter each week. You also know the deliveries are late again. Roads are muddy, the carter's boy likely sick again, and the last of the apples was served 2 days ago with stale honey. You glance at the shelves. For the guests, you'll need to improvise. Perhaps a soft oat cake with a dusting of goose fat, some mashed beans with marjoram if it hasn't turned, and, miracle of miracles, 2 duck eggs that somehow escaped yesterday's stew, a splash of warmed ale to wash it all down. Not elegant, no, but plated with care. It might pass for rustic sophistication. Breakfasts in a noble household are not lavish affairs, at least not here. For the lords and their ilk, a simple morning repast, bread, ale, sometimes cheese or eggs, and fruit if the season is kind. Midday is the grander meal, multiple courses, sauces, display. Evenings are lighter again, often cold leftovers if the table groaned at noon. You, of course, eat when you can, if you can. Behind you, a maid drops a clay jug with a sharp crack. Goat's milk splashes across the floor. Elspeth swears like a sailor who's lost the tide. You step in, calm her with a word, hand the girl a rag, and move to the pantry. The pantry is a cramped, shadowed chamber off the kitchen, lined with barrels and sacks, jars and pickled things in brine. It smells of dust, vinegar, dried herbs and patience. You run your fingers along the hanging ropes of garlic and the wrinkled strings of apples. Shriveled, but not yet lost. You'll slice those thin, bake them with spice, and pretend it was intentional. You grab a crust of aged cheddar, sharp and dry, just enough to grate over the eggs. And then there's the meat, or rather, the argument that some dried salted scraps hanging near the ceiling still qualify as such. You tug one down. It's tough as shoe leather and smells like an old boot, but a quick sear might disguise that. Guests After all, eat with their eyes first. You re-enter the kitchen, arms full, and begin assembling the illusion of bounty. You guide the maids, toast this, warm that, drizzle just enough of that oil to look generous. A copper tray is heated over the coals to keep things warm for transport. Every gesture you make is purposeful, economical. It has to be. You've done this before, many times, often with even less. You pause for a moment, eyes scanning the bustle. Elspeth is quiet now, focused, her spoon stirring a pan of eggs that hiss just right against its surface. The air is rich with scent, onions caramelizing, bread crisping, a hint of thyme from the corner herb basket. You allow yourself a breath. This might work. Then Peter's voice rings again, from the hallway. His lordship says the guests expect fruit wine with their meal, sweet, imported if possible. You blink. Imported, as in from the south. Maybe Gascony, maybe farther. The cellar holds ale, some mead, even a bottle of weak cider. But fruit wine, that was finished at New Year's unless... You remember something? A forgotten crate, wedged behind the barrels in the cold cellar. It was deemed too cloudy and set aside. Not spoiled, not quite, but questionable. You'd left it there, thinking perhaps it would settle or explode. Now you have a choice. Disappoint your lord and risk his temper before the day even begins, or descend into the dark chill of the cellar and hope that bottle hasn't grown its own teeth. You exhale through your nose and step away from the hearth. The tray is nearly ready. The eggs look passable. The apple slices glisten under honey. A sprig of dried mint flutters on the oatcake like a noble afterthought. But that wine, that blasted wine. You wipe your palms on your tunic, glance at the firelight dancing across blackened pans, and head for the cellar stairs. Because if you're going to serve a passable breakfast with a lie at its center, you might as well make it convincing. But tell me, how did the kitchen become a battlefield in the first place? Wasn't food supposed to nourish, not terrify? You return from the cellar clutching the cloudy bottle like it's a holy relic wrapped in linen doubt. The cork is slightly askew, but still intact, and when you lift it to your nose, it doesn't smell deadly, just overconfident. Sweet with a hint of something fermented past its prime. It will have to do. The tray is ready. You place the bottle carefully beside the eggs and oatcakes, angling the dried mint just so. A final wipe to the copper edge with your sleeve. No time for pride. And you steady yourself. You're about to walk into a room where mistakes are noticed, names are remembered, and silver is counted before and after meals. You pass through the narrow corridor, boots clicking softly on worn stone, the weight of the tray making your arms sing with tension. Each step is measured. Too fast and you'll slosh the wine. Too slow, and you'll be summoned with that little silver bell that always rings twice. Once for impatience, twice for disdain. The hall is modest by noble standards, but to you it still feels impossibly large. Beams overhead blackened with decades of smoke, walls lined with tapestries thick with dust and saints. At the far end, beneath a high mullioned window, the table is set for 4. The hearth behind it throws out lazy warmth, and the chairs groan softly beneath their ornate occupants. You enter with a bowl so smooth, it might be muscle memory carved from years of repetition. The guests murmur, pausing their conversation. You recognize the tones, one nasal and sharp, probably the minor lord steward, one lilting with arrogance, the third, younger, trying too hard to sound older. Your master sits at the head, wrapped in velvet the color of spilled ink, fingers absently tapping the armrest, You place the tray before them. One maid follows at a distance, ready to refill cups or fetch forgotten things. You stand still, watchful, silent. The younger guest picks at his oatcake. The steward prods the eggs with a spoon, nose wrinkling. Soft, you said. He asked no one in particular, but everyone knows it's for your benefit. You don't flinch. Your master glances up. His eyes flick to the plate, then to you. Nothing is said, but the tilt of his head says more than words. You failed, mildly, but perceptibly. A soft sigh escapes him, and the tension in the room thickens, like a sauce left too long on the fire. Then the third guest, the one in plum-coloured hose with a scent of clove and rose water, leans back in his chair. His voice is lower. I heard your silver service has grown lighter of late, he says, swishing his wine. Perhaps it's the walls growing fat with secrets. Your ears catch fire, not from the heat, but the implication. The steward chuckles dryly. Your master says nothing, only raises a brow. The plum-hosed man continues. I only mention it because we had a similar problem at my uncle's hall in Lincoln. Turned out the butler had a taste for candlelight and coin. You feel the blood rise to your ears. Not hot, but tight. The kind of tension that makes every thread of your tunic feel like rope. Your fingers twitch, but you keep them still. You say nothing. That's the rule. Never speak unless addressed directly. The wine bottle is lifted, poured, sipped. A grunt of approval. Small mercy. At least the lie was palatable. Conversation resumes, but you're no longer listening to content. You're reading tones, watching hands, noting who leaves their knife too close to the edge, whose gaze lingers too long on the goblets. Because now there's a whisper, not just in the room, but in the hallways. Silver missing, someone suspected, and you're standing close enough to hear your own name float behind closed doors. You withdraw from the table with another bow, your back burning with scrutiny. Outside the hall, the air feels heavier. You lean for a moment against the cold stone of the corridor, letting the chill seep into your spine. Below stairs, the kitchen buzzes on. The scullery maid hums off key. A spit squeaks as it turns. The world continues, but a new note has joined the melody. Suspicion. You make your way down toward the storerooms, checking inventory as a pretense for thought. The silver is counted regularly. By you, in fact. Each spoon, goblet, tray. You know them better than you know your own teeth. But now you'll need to be more careful. Now, even knowing isn't enough. Now someone is setting traps in the dark. You find yourself staring at a shelf of preserved pears. There's syrup clinging to the sides of cloudy glass. The torch crackles above you, smoke threading upward. Someone spoke your name. You're certain of it. You turn sharply at the sound of footsteps, soft, hesitant. It's Marjorie, one of the upper chambermaids. She pauses, eyes shifting to the side. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, she says, but they were speaking about you. You nod. There's nothing else to say. The echo of the plum-hosed man's accusation still dances in your skull. She hesitates again. Do you think it's true? About someone stealing? You study her face. She's young, too young to lie well. Her fear smells faintly of lavender and ashes. I don't know, you reply. But if someone is, they're clever. Or they were. Until now. She nods once and slips away. You stay behind, gaze falling on the reflection of the torchlight in a polished serving plate. Your face looks older there, lines drawn deeper by shadow. Because now the question isn't just who's stealing. It's this. What happens to a butler? When suspicion becomes more dangerous than guilt itself, of course it becomes more dangerous. In your world, Suspicion isn't smoke. It's fire waiting for breath. So you do what you've always done. Take control. You descend deeper into the belly of the castle, toward the small locked chamber where the silver is kept. Or at least what hasn't walked off yet. The storeroom is built into the thickest part of the stone foundation, tucked behind the buttery. Its door is wooden, iron-banded, cold to the touch even in the spring months. You fish the iron key from your tunic. It always rests near your chest, tucked behind your linen undershirt, and turn it slowly. The lock complains but yields. Inside, the air is still and dry. Shelves line the walls, crowded with wooden trays bearing goblets, tankards, serving platters, cutlery, even the odd snuff spoon or salt cellar. Every item has its place, marked with chalk symbols or tiny leather tags. It's not luxurious here. This isn't a treasury, but it is organized, painstakingly so. You strike a taper and set it into the holder, casting trembling gold light over polished metal. Your eyes move quickly. 4 large platters, 2 missing last month, but later found under the linen press. 8 goblets, no, 7. The 8th is still with the steward for a polishing demonstration. You remind yourself to retrieve it before it becomes a gift. You kneel to examine the bottom shelf. The spoons, 16 long-handled, 12 dessert, 6 marked with the old family crest, back from before the last marriage alliance. The forks are easiest. Only the Lord eats with them regularly. Others use fingers or knives. There's no waste in this count, not yet. Still, the dread doesn't lift. You rise, rubbing your knees, and pull the ledger from the wall niche. Ink, sealed under wax the night before. You crack it, scratch your notes carefully, and close it again with that familiar snap. A sound only you and time have ever heard. Order. That's your first duty. You don't just serve. You manage. You remember how it began. 10 years ago, maybe more, when you were barely old enough to carry a tray without trembling. One of the older maids dropped a goblet during a wedding feast, and it cracked the stone floor. The lady of the house had been in mourning, her patience thinned by grief and clove-stuffed handkerchiefs. The maid was dismissed that night. No final pay, no blessing, not even a lantern for the road. You watched from the corridor as she packed her things in silence. A comb, a shawl, a string of worn beads. Her place was filled within a day. That was your first lesson in quiet control. Since then, you've learned the language of household power. Who curtsies when no one's watching. Who sharpens their knives slower than needed. Who swaps beds after midnight. You don't accuse. You record. You adjust. You rotate maids who whisper too much, split footmen who drink too close. You listen to tone more than words. And when something goes missing, like now, your hands move faster than the gossip. You return the key to your tunic and step out into the main hallway, torchlight dancing along the stone. A serving boy passes you with a bucket. You nod. He avoids your eyes. Always does. Either guilt or just terror of your shoes. Hard to tell. You make a mental list. Fetch the goblet from the steward. Remind Elspeth to record what she borrowed from the wine rack. Inspect the larder lock. It sticks. And someone might have realized that. You'll check the seal on the side entrance, where carts are offloaded. You'll track which maid was last seen near the solar. You'll reweigh the sugar tin in the morning. You'll test the cellar bottles for thinning. Your thoughts are interrupted by the distant chime of the chapel bell. Sext. Mid-morning already. You haven't eaten. You walk past the hall where guests dined and see the remains of their meal being cleared. You glance at the scraps. The oatcake was barely touched, the eggs poked but not finished. One apple slice has been taken, the rest left to brown. But the wine, that suspicious bottle from the cellar, is nearly empty. You file that away too. You file that away too. On your way back to the main quarters, you find Thomas leaning against the corner post. He's polishing a helmet, a task no one asked him to do. You pause, watching. He looks up too fast. Just keeping things tidy, he says. Of course, you reply. He's new. No history. Few allies. Too clean. You make a note. Order. That's the key to survival. But order doesn't last without consequences. And in your world, justice is rarely blind. It's practical. You recall what happened to the last page who dropped the candle near the drapes. He was 10. Smart. Too quick with replies. The drapes caught fire. The Lord's temper lit faster. The page lost more than his post. A punishment doesn't have to be public to be final. You return to your quarters and begin drafting the evening assignment list. Who's on hall duty? Who assists in the solar? Who draws the bath? You do it all yourself. If you delegate, errors multiply. And when errors multiply, suspicion spreads like damp in the laundry walls. But you wonder, how many of these servants, faces you see daily, carry their own ledgers in secret? Private accounts of slights and favours. Which of them might already be calculating your fall? And deeper still, could someone be using this stolen silver not for greed, but as a step in their own quiet, ruthless rise? You barely have time to set the goblet record straight before a sharp rap rattles your chamber door. 3 knocks, the signal from Bess, the maid who runs messages for the lady of the house. No one else knocks like that. It's precise, impatient, and always too early. She wants you. Now. Bess huffs through the gap in the door. The green bodice isn't fitting right. Of course it isn't. You cross the hall in quick steps, your boots tapping over uneven flagstones. Past the solar, past the linen press, where lavender sachets hang like sleepy bells. The air thickens as you near her chamber, scented still, and a little sour from the rush of heated perfumes and wax. The ladies' quarters sit in the eastern wing, where the light is golden in the morning. Curtains are drawn back, spilling a soft wash of sun over the elaborate floor rug, imported from somewhere Turkish or pretending to be. The room smells like beeswax, rose oil, and something bitter underneath. Likely that wretched salve she insists on applying to her temples for headaches. It reeks of thyme and vinegar. You pause at the threshold. She's already mid-sentence. And if Marjorie tugs that lacing again, I'll have her fingers dipped in starch. She doesn't look at you yet. She's standing with arms extended, her shift clinging damply to her back, while 2 maids scurry behind her with handfuls of embroidered fabric. The green bodice is on the bed, folded like a stubborn accusation. Fix this, she says without turning. They can't lace it properly, and I won't be made to look like a sausage at Lord Densher's feast. You step in, nod to the maids, and lift the bodice. It's made of dark green wool with a silk lining, tiny hand-stitched details on the sleeves. The fabric is stiff near the waist, overboned no doubt, and the edges are bristling with hurried mending. She's worn it before, and too tightly. You hold it between your hands, fingers automatically smoothing the wrinkles, noting the warping where the seams have pulled. She shifts her weight, arms crossed now. Well, it can be relaced lower, you say. And the panel's shifted. You'll need the side stays adjusted. Shall I send for the needlewoman? A sigh. She pricks me. Then I'll do it. She softens, slightly. You always did have clever hands. You kneel and begin to work, aware of the silence settling in the room like dust. One maid steps back, folding chemises into a cedar chest. Another arranges slippers by the foot of the bed. Outside the window, a bird warbles, oddly out of place in this perfume box of a room. The bodice tightens slowly, the green fabric creaking in protest. You talk as you work, just enough to distract her. You mention the feast menu. You ask about her new ring. She tells you Lord Densher's wife is a flapping hen, and that if she must dine next to her, she'll need a stronger wine than last time. The conversation is light, practiced, until it isn't. She turns her head slightly, not all the way, just enough to catch you in the corner of her eye. That tunic of yours is looking rather tired, she murmurs. You pause. It wasn't like that last month, she continues. The hem's worn, and the collar, it's gone soft. You say nothing. You know where this is going. Have you not been paid? She asks. I have. A beat. Then why haven't you replaced it? You straighten slowly, the final tie in place. There've been other expenses. Oh. Her tone sharpens like a pin drawn from a cushion. You don't have a family. You don't drink. You don't gamble. Your shoes are still holding. Silence stretches. You meet her eyes then. Briefly, just enough. Candles, you say. Ledgers. A new key for the pantry. A patch for the roof above the scullery. Things that needed doing. She raises an eyebrow. Things that aren't your responsibility. You don't reply. You've learned not to argue about responsibility with those who believe titles are their sole burden. Her gaze lingers on your collar, the frayed edge of thread, the place where wool has thinned from too many scrubbings in too cold water. It's strange, she murmurs. You always seem so neat, so careful. Now you look. Her voice trails off. You don't wait for the word. You step back and bow, precise and deep. The bodice will hold, but only if it's not pulled beyond what it was made for. She blinks once, then nods. Dismissed. You step out, heart thudding not from insult. You're long past that, but from the knowledge behind her words. She's not the only one noticing. If your clothing draws questions, your work might draw suspicion. But what she doesn't know is that your money has been moving somewhere else, because some things aren't paid for with coin. And now you must ask, what price do you pay to keep order when the house itself is beginning to watch you? You've been asked where your money goes. The answer is simple. It vanishes. Not with drama or theft or indulgence, but slowly, dutifully, like rain soaking into a field that never seems to green. Your pay is 30 pence a quarter. A decent sum, on paper. More than the grooms, more than the laundresses even. But decent is a word used by those who never count coins before sleep. Start with your quarters. The room you sleep in, a narrow stone slit of a space near the root cellar, is technically yours, but nothing in it is free. You patch its roof with your coin, not because you have to, but because you're tired of waking to dripping lime water and mouse droppings on your ledger. That patch last month cost 2 pence, paid to the carpenter's nephew, who can't measure straight, but does know how to keep quiet. Food. You eat with the staff, if you're lucky. The main kitchen sends down boiled grains, leftover stew, heel bread and salt. And when the castle hosts guests, there's sometimes a sliver of cold meat, but even then you supplement. You buy your own peppercorns in town, a rare luxury, a pouch at a time, stored in oilskin under your mattress. For flavour, for control. 1 penny per pouch, worth every grain. Clothing? The tunic she mentioned, that frayed one. It was mended twice already. You had it dyed charcoal grey to hide the wear, but the seams still feel like paper. Replacements cost more than a fortnight's pay. 4 to 5 shillings, depending on the wool. And that doesn't count buttons, thread, or the cobbler's time to stitch the hem so it doesn't bunch under your belt. And the belt, that leather strip you polish every week, a gift once, years ago, from a steward who's now dead. You polish it with lard and ash because proper wax is too dear. Then there are the unspoken expenses. A bottle of vinegar to clean the brass, a brush for your boots, made from hog bristle and gilt, a coin for the candle the page boy delivers after dusk. He shouldn't charge you, but he does, and you let him. Because control begins with permission. Every servant pays the baker's daughter to keep a loaf aside, one that's not yet dry, not yet laced with blue mould. You do too. A halfpenny each week, and taxes. Yes, even as a servant, you're not free from them. The reeve visits quarterly with a smirk and a parchment scroll. Hearth tax, market tax, gate tolls if you venture beyond the bridge, a levy for the church roof, though it's patched with tin and prayer. You count them carefully and try not to look irritated. Too much irritation leads to audits. Of course, you save what you can. 14 pence buried beneath the flagstone near your cot, wrapped in oilcloth beside a bent spoon and a St. Cuthbert medal. Your only real treasure. You never drink, not anymore. Once you did, shared a mug with the master of horse under a willow tree. Laughed too loudly. That was the night the second scullery maid tripped on a staircase. Your name was mentioned, though you weren't there. Lesson learned. You don't smoke either. No pipe, no dried herbs. The fumes cling to wool and whisper secrets to noses with better places to be. You keep your scent neutral, a faint trace of soap if you can get it, lavender dust when you cannot. You don't linger in wine halls. You walk the long road to the village when needed, but not too often. Familiarity breeds inquiry. Inquiry breeds lists. Sometimes you buy gifts, discreet ones. A comb for Bess when her father was ill. A ribbon for Marjorie last spring. Not because you're kind, but because kindness, like polish, earns silence. Your days bleed coin, but none of it feels wasteful. Because in this place, reputation is built not on wealth, but friction. The quieter your path, the smoother the gears turn around you. And if it costs you your comfort, well, that's the least expensive thing you have. You consider now the comment from your lady, the suspicion from the guests, the glance from the steward, just a little too long, the crack in your leather shoe. And you wonder, what exactly is a living wage when your job requires you to live less than fully human? You start your day carrying trays through echoing stone corridors, the chill of the morning air nipping at your skin through the thin fabric of your tunic. The scent of damp mortar mingles with the faint, smoky aroma of last night's dying fire in the great hall. Your footsteps tap softly on cold flagstones as you navigate the maze-like halls, each creak and whisper a reminder that this castle breathes with secrets. As you approach the solar, where your lord and lady take their morning meal, the air shifts, heavier, tinged with the fragrance of spiced wine and beeswax candles. You catch the gleam of silk and velvet, muted by the worn threads of age, but still unmistakably noble. The flicker of candlelight dances across tapestries depicting battles and saints, and the low murmur of courtly conversation fills the room. You lay out the morning bread, hard and dense, alongside bowls of pottage, thick with vegetables from the Lord's gardens. The clink of silverware punctuates the quiet. Your lord's gaze fixes on you, a thin line of disapproval drawn across his brow. One of the guests, a well-dressed merchant, complains sharply about the eggs. Not soft enough, he says, as if the quality of your work determines the fate of kingdoms. The lady next to him sniffs disdainfully. her embroidered sleeves brushing the edge of the tablecloth. You feel the weight of eyes, the unspoken accusations hanging like the heavy velvet drapes. The tension is palpable, a subtle charge that electrifies the room, making your skin prickle beneath your threadbare tunic. You're aware of every sound, the scrape of a chair, the muted cough behind a fan of lace, the faint shuffle of servants beyond the door. Then, almost inaudible, a whisper threads through the chatter, something about silver missing from the storeroom. You catch the words, a name half spoken, and the quick glance shared between the steward and the chamberlain. Your heart tightens. The whisper spreads like a shadow creeping across the floorboards. You wonder, silently, who could be the thief? And more importantly, how will this affect your already precarious standing in the household? The moment stretches, the candlelight flickers, and you realize that beneath the grand feast and polished manners, the castle hides a web of suspicion and betrayal. What will you do when the shadows of doubt fall on you? So you organize a search. It begins not with shouting nor clanging bells. That's for noble folk who think noise means action. You begin with eyes. You scan the corridors. You measure footsteps. You listen to what isn't being said. Then you gather them, the junior staff, the ones whose names echo less than the pans they carry. In the side corridor behind the chapel, near the old weaving room with the door that never quite closes, you summon 5 of them. Peter, the page, hands twitching at the hem of his too short tunic. Marjorie, the chambermaid, eyes sharp but tired. Will from the stable, smelling faintly of hay and nervous sweat. Joan, the laundry girl, who always watches more than she speaks. And Thomas, too neat, too quiet. You don't bark, you instruct, calmly, precisely. The Lord's roan gelding is loose, you say. Gone sometime after second bell, likely between the far paddock and the river bend. He favours the marsh grass. You'll sweep the north trail. You'll check the water line. You, the hedgerows. You point, not harshly, but with weight. Your voice isn't raised. It doesn't need to be. They move. They always do. Because you're not just the butler. You're the hinge between command and consequence. You're the voice that never shouts, and that's why they hear it. You know who sharpens knives slowly, who borrows bread, who kisses whom behind the bakery wall when the fires burn low. The hierarchy is clear. At the top, the lord and lady, of course. Below them, the stewards, masters of horses, chaplains, ladies in waiting. Below them, you, the butler, which means above everyone else who sweats in laced linen and calls, "Yes, sir," before they think. You know the rhythms. You control the flow. Who gets the week old boots? Who gets first bath water? Who carries the wine? And who empties the chamber pots? And when things go wrong, like a missing horse, all eyes trace back to you eventually. So you keep order. You must. In the laundry room, you keep track of who leaves their shift too early. In the kitchens, you note when too much salt is used, a sign that someone's stealing herbs to sell. You pay attention to tone, posture, silence. You reward those who confess before being asked. You punish privately. A change of shift, a missed evening meal, a cold shoulder that lasts for days. It's not cruelty, it's precision. Because the Lord may own the land, but you maintain the movement. If you show weakness, the walls wobble. If you flinch, the rot spreads. You recall once, the old butler, Mr. Corley, before he retired to his nephew's mill, he told you one night while wiping pewter, "Don't ever outfriend the staff. They'll love you until you fail them, and they'll fail you the second you're no longer useful." You didn't understand it then. You do now. By mid-morning, the slant of sunlight through the cloister windows has shifted. The bells toll for none. You pace through the back corridors, checking progress. Peter returns empty-handed but muddy, breathless and flushed. He mutters about hoofprints by the river, but no sign of the beast. Thomas found tracks near the orchard wall. Marjorie says she heard something in the thicket, but couldn't see. You nod, file it away. You praise efficiency. You correct sloppiness, quietly. Then you notice Will, the stable boy. His tunic is cleaner than it should be. Did you find anything? You ask, voice level. He hesitates. Nothing, sir. I looked by the western hedge. You glance down. No burrs, no wet marks, no trace of grass stain. Go back, you say, this time with Joan. The hedge needs 2 pairs of eyes. He reddens, nods, turns. Joan doesn't question. They leave. You watch them vanish around the corner, the soft sound of their footfalls dissolving into the hush of the hall. The torches flicker gently in their sconces. Far off, a dog barks, short and urgent. You wonder, not for the first time, whether any of them could have set this up, not out of rebellion, no, but ambition. What if the gelding's disappearance wasn't carelessness? What if someone down the chain was testing your grip? Because when the structure starts to bend, do the servants notice first, or do they cause the bend to begin with? They didn't cause the bend. They revealed it. You find the gelding near the orchard wall, tangled in bramble and mood. His bridle is still looped around his thick neck, dusted in leaf mould. The animal snorts as you approach, eyes wide but unpanicked. A quick tug on the reins and he yields, like he knew you'd come for him all along. Thomas trails behind you on the path back to the stables, silent except for his boots squelching in the soft dirt. He doesn't meet your eyes. He doesn't need to. You've already drawn your conclusions. The stable hands rush out when they hear hooves. Relief first, then realization. It's too late. The Lord already knows. A page finds you before you've wiped your hands. His voice cracks. His lordship wants you. In the great hall. No please. No now. Just the summons. You change your tunic, but too quickly. You button it wrong the first time. Your hands are shaking, not from guilt, but from the weight of being summoned for nothing. That's the worst kind of audience, when no one says why. The great hall looms before you. Its high-arched entrance swallows light and echo. You step through. The air is colder here somehow, though the hearth blazes with a respectful fire. Banners hang from the beams above, stiff with age, moth-eaten at the edges. They stir slightly in the draught, as if they're watching. You stand alone on the flagstone floor. Before you, at the raised dais, sits your lord. Black doublet, fur-lined sleeves, fingers steepled, elbows sharp against carved armrests. To his right, the steward. To his left, a guest still lingering from the morning meal. The one with the plum hose and too much wine knowledge. You bow, precisely, deeply. He doesn't speak at first. You feel the weight of the silence, like being held underwater. Not enough to drown, just long enough to make you wonder if the surface ever existed. When the Lord does speak, his voice is soft. That's worse. The gelding was not in his stall this morning. You nod once. Found near the orchard wall, my lord. He's unharmed. Silence again. Do you know how he escaped? I don't. You feel the lie in your mouth, but it isn't really a lie. You suspect, but you don't know. And in this hall, suspicion is air. Knowledge is weapon. He leans back, eyes still locked on yours. My steward tells me the rear gate was unlatched, that the latch was fine the night before. His fingers flex once, then still. Do you manage the keys? You nod. I do. Do you delegate their use? You pause. When needed, a twitch of his eyebrow. Was it needed? You open your mouth, close it, because here truth is a rope. Too much pull, and you're tangled. Too little, and it slips. You exhale slowly. No. There's a shift beside him. The steward murmurs something you don't catch. The guest smirks faintly, eyes on your boots. Your lord rises. The fire throws shadows across his face, carving new lines where none existed before. You were warned before, he said. The household runs on precision. My horses are my pride. My guests are my voice, my butler. His gaze sharpens. My butler is my spine. You say nothing. You can't. He steps down from the dais. Each footfall clicks against the stone like a counted breath. When he stops in front of you, his voice lowers to something nearly intimate. I will decide your place here tomorrow, he says. Not your punishment, not your role, not even your worth, your place. Then he turns, dismissed. You walk out of the hall with your spine straight, your stomach curling. The corridor feels colder now, though the torches burn steady. You pass Marjorie on the stairs. She glances at you, but doesn't speak. Thomas disappears into the courtyard before you reach it. Above you, a crow lands on the parapet. You think about the word place. In a castle like this, that could mean many things. A new role, a demotion, a public shame, or a locked room no one visits except on feast days. Because when your place is no longer trusted, is it still yours? And what happens when the only person who ever controlled the servants suddenly becomes one of them? Your lord says he'll decide your place tomorrow. And you know what that means. Not just a change in role, not just a smaller room or fewer keys. It means risk of displacement, exposure, collapse. And in a household like this, displaced is only one syllable away from discarded. You've seen it before. You remember John, the steward's clerk. Hands always inked, voice barely above breath. He miscounted the flour once, just once. It wasn't even theft, just misplacement. 3 sacks gone missing, later found in the brewer's loft. But the damage was done. The master was embarrassed before guests, and someone had to carry the weight. John left with nothing but a satchel and a bruise on his cheek that wasn't from falling. No pension, no letter of transfer, no boots fit for travel. He was last seen begging work from a reeve near Basingstoke, his hands no longer steady enough to write. And then there was Alice. She'd worked as chambermaid for the lady's sister, quick with ribbon, clever with hair, but she laughed once too loud at the wrong joke, and the lady heard. Laughter, in some places, is considered treason. By week's end, Alice was gone. Official reason? Insubordination. Actual reason? Discomfort. Her bed was reassigned before it cooled. Punishment doesn't always come with a whip or a stocks display. Sometimes it's quieter, more surgical. You lose privileges. The good broom, the strong apron, the right to sit near the fire. You're sent to the cold corridor, assigned to linen folding, not because you fold poorly, but because there's no conversation in that room, just silence and starch. But when the punishment is physical, it's deliberate. A dropped platter can mean a knotted switch across the back of the calves. A slashed curtain, even by accident, brings the threat of public scolding, maybe worse. Theft, depending on what was taken, fingers, or just the right to eat with others, and the law rarely intervenes. Servants aren't protected like townsmen. You're considered part of the household, like furniture that talks. And when that furniture displeases the master, it's moved, burned, or replaced. No magistrate, no appeal. You remember the carpenter's boy, caught kissing the footman behind the outer stables. The punishment? Banished from service, branded on the shoulder with a mark. A discreet one, under the collarbone, so he'd remember propriety. His crime wasn't violence, it was softness. Even now you see him sometimes on market days, shoulders stooped under a fish cart, selling mackerel like it means nothing. Not every punishment scars the body. Some dig deeper, loss of trust. That's the cruelest blow. When eyes avoid you in corridors, when conversations lower as you pass, when even the cat stops following you into the buttery. You've made a career from being necessary, but necessity, like respect, is always rented, never owned. You recall the rule old Mr. Corley whispered once: the house protects itself, and if you can't keep it safe, it will chew through you like rats in grain. You walk the hallway now, your footfalls quieter than usual, your mind tracing invisible diagrams of danger. Every misplaced item, every late task, every look that lingers too long, a ledger of suspicion. You've punished others, fairly you hope, a half portion, an extra shift, a quiet warning. But you've never been on the edge yourself, until now. And you wonder, no, you fear. What happens when your Lord decides you're more threat than shield? When the man who holds the keys becomes the man held outside the gate? Because if you're no longer the one keeping the order, who will be the one to deliver your sentence? You don't sleep, you don't pace, you prepare. The midday bell rings slow and hollow, 6 strokes, each falling like a coin into water. You take it as your cue. If you can't control your Lord's temper, you can at least control his table. The great hall, now cleared of its earlier shadow, glows in the high light of noon. Leaded windows cast fractured patches of warm light across the flagstone floor. The scent of roasted meats floats from the kitchen. Lamb with rosemary, turnips simmered in ale, trenchers cut thick from the morning's bake. You oversee everything, not out of vanity, but necessity. Elspeth's girls move with too much haste. The steward's new boy sets knives with the blades facing outward. A foolish mistake. You correct it with a tap no more. The salt cellars are aligned. The pitcher handles face left. The platters are warmed at the hearth for precisely the right amount of time. You've done this hundreds of times. But today, every napkin fold feels like a test. Every wrinkle in the tablecloth feels personal. The dais is set for 7. Your lord, his 2 guests, the lady, and 3 members of the local minor gentry, here to discuss sheep and tariffs, and whose cousin married poorly. You direct the goblets yourself, pewter, polished with a mixture of vinegar and sand until they almost shine. The wine jugs are brought from the cellar, wrapped in linen to protect from draughts. You feel each one with your hands, not too warm, not too cold. That's the goal anyway. But something feels off. You ignore it. There's no time for doubt. At the strike of 2nd bell, they arrive. Robes rustle, voices settle. The Lord says nothing as he sits, but his gaze brushes over you once, and you feel its weight. You nod, a gesture so small only those trained to see would catch it. Service begins. Trenchers laid, meats carved, ale poured, then replaced with wine at the Lord's raised hand. The room hums with formal quiet, not silence, but restrained civility. Forks scrape, goblets clink. Bread is passed in silence, butter spread with care. You direct the footman with a glance. A nod means pour. A touch to the shoulder means hold. You focus on the rhythm, the choreography of hospitality. This is your arena. And for a brief moment, you feel yourself anchored again. Until he speaks. The guest in plum hose, the same who smirked at breakfast, lifts his goblet and sniffs. He doesn't drink. He tilts the cup, watches the wine swirl. The firelight catches in the ruby liquid. Then he says it. Curious, he murmurs, voice not loud, but sharp enough to cut. The wine is cold. The hall stills. Your spine straightens before your thoughts do. It is Gascon, he continues. Yes? A delicate vintage. Served chilled. It loses its perfume. Its grace. He doesn't look at you. He looks at the Lord. A greater insult could hardly be whispered. Your Lord says nothing at first. He merely lifts his own goblet, sips. The pause that follows is not long, but heavy. The kind of pause that threatens. You feel every eye in the room turn towards you. Not directly, no one dares, but sideways. Like flickers of wind pressing against a door before a storm. You step forward, bow slightly. It was taken from the inner cellar, my lord. The stone there holds the morning's cool longer than expected. Silence again. The guest smiles. Perhaps your cellar is more diligent than your butler. The room exhales, barely. Your heart beats like a bell hammer. Cold wine is a faux pas, but in noble houses, it's read as more. A message, a symbol. Cold hospitality, cold intentions, cold status. You search for a correction, a turn, a recovery. But the damage is done. Not in the flavor of the drink, but in the taste of the moment. You see the steward shift in his seat. You see your lord's fingers flex once around the stem of his goblet. You can fix this, but not here, not now. And so you wonder, what do you serve next when your apology can't be plated and your mistake already sours the tongue? You know now what a cold cup can cost. So you return, in thought and in step, to the cellar, to the heart of service that most never see, where drink is born, aged, watched. You descend the worn stone steps as you've done countless times, but now with a new kind of reverence. The air down here smells of damp wood, time, and something darker. Not quite rot, not quite memory, just oldness. The barrels stand like loyal sentries, heavy, round, breathing silence. Wine, ale, mead, each in its place, each with its rhythm. In noble houses, wine is more than pleasure. It's status, power, message. Gascon red, imported across the channel, taxed twice, favoured for its deep hue and dry dignity, is served only for guests of rank. Sweet Rhenish whites, pale gold, slightly effervescent, are poured at weddings and spring feasts. Local blends, if the harvest was good, might make it to the high table on fast days or during Lent. And then there's ale. Brown, thick, flat, but warm, honest and filling. Brewed in the back house by Elspeth's cousin. Strained through linen. Flavoured with heather or fennel. That's for the rest of the house. The grooms, the maids, you. It keeps the cold away, dulls the edge of old injuries. And unlike wine, no one counts how much you've had, unless you start singing. Storage is his own ceremony. Barrels lie flat on trestles marked with chalk. The lower ones sweat in summer, the higher ones chill too long in winter. You learned long ago to turn them each week, gently but firmly, or the sediment spoils the pour. A lazy cask is a sour cask. Bottles, rare. Reserved for imported vintages, sealed with wax, laid sideways in the stone niches carved by masons who likely never tasted the things they preserved. And the cups, oh the cups, pewter for the everyday nobility, silver for feast days, glass rare and fragile, imported from Venice if the lord is feeling generous. You polish them with soft cloth and ash water until they shine like mirrors, until you can see your own doubt in their curves. Temperature matters, but not for comfort. Not then. It's a signal. Warm wine suggests intimacy, confidence. Cold wine, unless it's the new white, suggests carelessness, or insult, or worse, a poor household that stores all drink underground with no steward to tend it properly. You've never served wine from the same jug to different classes. Never would. That's not just a faux pas. It's a breach of order. Squires drink before knights. night before Lord's, and the Lord always receives his pour from a different vessel, decanted, if possible, to remove sediment and scent of cork. Water? Only for the devout or the sick. Mead? A luxury, sweet and spiced, for midwinter nights or childbirth blessings, brewed with honey stolen from the Lord's apiary. Once a year, no more. Cider? Commoner's fare. Sharp, good with pork, rarely served above the salt line on the table. And for the lowest, for the ones who eat with bent heads, there's small beer, low in alcohol, brewed weak, barely bitter, enough to wet the throat, not enough to soften the day. You step between the barrels, running your hand along one marked in Latin script. Vinum rubrum, 1347. Dust coats your fingers. A spider scurries between the staves. Above you the bell tolls again. Vespers approaching. You'll be expected soon for evening rounds. The lady takes honeyed water before sleep. The guests may linger over roasted pears. Your lord may say nothing, or summon you again. But now, as you stand among these vessels of taste and temper, you realize something. Service is fermentation, time, pressure, silence and motion. And when done well, no one notices. Only when something spoils does anyone pause to ask, who bottled this? And so you wonder, what's aging quietly in the dark corners of this house? And will it turn sweet or sour? You survive the wine, barely. No punishment follows, at least not yet. The Lord says nothing. The guest smirks, but the conversation shifts to falconry, to border disputes, to rumors of a distant harvest blight. You take the silence as permission to move on. But the day is not done, not even close. Because tonight is entertainment. You feel it begin in the marrow of the stone. A rhythm, not quite music yet, but the hum of preparation. The castle shifts in tone. The air grows warm with anticipation. Guests retreat briefly to their chambers. Maids scurry with combs and ribbons. Footmen carry benches, rearrange carpets. You orchestrate it all with nods and murmurs. The hall must be transformed. Tables cleared, benches set along the walls. Candles, hundreds, placed with care along window ledges, mantelpieces, sconces, beeswax mostly. The cheap tallow ones sting too much and sputter. These must burn steady, casting golden pools across the flags. Musicians arrive just before dusk. 2 pipers, a rebec player, and a boy with bells stitched to his boots. They smell of wool, leather, and distant tobacco smoke. You direct them to the alcove near the hearth, where the acoustics will fill the chamber without too much echo. Outside, the sky bleeds orange into purple. Inside, light multiplies. You move like clockwork. You direct servants to unroll the tapestry rug with the griffin border. You position the Lord's chair, raised slightly above the others, its arms draped in velvet. Goblets are refilled. Fruit placed on pewter trays. Pears, apples, sugared plums for the higher guests. Nuts in shells for the lesser. The first strains of music begin. A low, winding melody. Tentative, like the castle is testing its own memory of joy. And then they arrive. The guests, redressed, refreshed, flushed from rest or wine or both. The lady wears a gown of deep blue with silver trim, her hair braided with ribbons. The Lord dons his second best tunic, the one with the lion clasp. Others trail behind them, laughing softly, fans open, fingers twiddling with rings. The games begin first. Dice for the bold, riddles for the shy. One noble suggests blindfold dancing. Another proposes a game of truth for bread, where a question must be answered, or the guest must eat an entire crust dipped in mustard. The laughter grows louder, the music quicker. You glide between the groups like a ghost, refilling, adjusting, smoothing, a dropped handkerchief, a spilled cup, a cushion out of place. You fix them all without being seen. The air thickens with heat, with perfume, with noise. The flicker of so many candles makes shadows dance across the ceiling like playful spirits. The torches flare high along the outer walls. One near the tapestries burns too bright. You make a note to trim it, and then you hear it. A hiss, a pop, a flicker, too sharp, too wild. You turn in time to see it. A candle, one of the tall brass ones by the wine table, topples sideways. Someone's sleeve, perhaps, or a nudge. It strikes the linen cloth, the red one, the one soaked earlier with spilled honeyed wine. The flame kisses the fabric, and the fabric, traitor that it is, embraces it. A line of fire snakes along the edge of the cloth like a hunting dog finding scent. Guests gasp. One maid drops her tray. The musicians falter 2 notes into a reel. You lurch forward, breath caught mid-lung. Because there's no water nearby, no well bucket, no sand barrel, just wine, wool, wax, fire. And every eye will be on you now, not the steward, not the guests. What will you do when your only tools are linen, instinct, and time burning faster than the wick? You don't think, you move. Before anyone can scream, before panic can bloom into chaos, you seize the edge of the flaming cloth and wrench it down. The fire snaps like an insult, but you're faster. You twist the fabric, crushing flame with linen and pressure. Knees grinding into the flagstone, arms braced like a soldier's. Smoke curls into your face, stinging your eyes with the bitter perfume of scorched honey and wax. The music has stopped. Feet shuffle back. Voices rise, too many at once. You don't hear them. You see only the ember still flickering along the edge of the cloth. Then a bucket slams down beside you. Cold water, not much, but enough. You douse the last of the flame, steam rising with a hiss like breath through gritted teeth. The cloth smoulders. The fire dies. Only now does the silence return. You sit back on your heels, smoke wet and trembling. Your hands sting, not burned but raw from speed and friction. And then you rise. Stay back, you say, calm, measured, to no one and everyone. You inspect the area. The stone beneath is unharmed. The table, scorched at the corner but intact. The candlestick lies bent, its wax puddled like tears. The wine jug beside it is still upright. A miracle. One of the maids, wide-eyed, brings more water. Too late, but you nod anyway. Behind her, a footman enters with a wooden box of sand, sloshing slightly. You wave him forward. He sprinkles the area in a practiced arc. Not because the fire still burns, but because the show of response is part of the protocol. And protocol matters. Because in a castle like this, fire is more than danger. It's a stain, a memory, a whispered failure. The Lord stands now, watching. He doesn't speak, but his silence isn't the same as earlier. There's no fury in it, just calculation. You bow once, deep, not apologetic, just formal. And then you begin the true work. You send for new linens. You replace the scorched fruit. You command 2 servants to inspect the other candles. Wick length, base stability, wax drip. Every corner is double-checked. The fire at the hearth is lowered. The torch brackets are tightened. Because this cannot happen again. But the truth is, it could. Fire in a castle is like breath in winter. Always near, always threatening. Most walls are stone, yes. But that means little when the floors are wood, the tapestry's thick, the rush is dry. Water buckets are stationed near the kitchen and near the stairwells, refilled daily, in theory. But if the well's low, or the lads are lazy, even that fails. Sand is better. Doesn't evaporate, doesn't freeze. It's kept in barrels near the buttery and under the great stair. Some stewards mix it with ash for greater smothering. You prefer raw grain sand, heavier, easier to cast. And then there are the hooks, long iron poles used to pull down burning tapestries or bring collapsing beams to the ground before they fall on someone. You've only had to use one once, years ago, when the chimney near the chapel spat sparks onto the choir loft. The memory still sits behind your ribs. Smoke signs are taught to pages. 3 fingers waved in a circle. Alarm bells can be rung by pulling the hall rope. In most castles, they only toll for fire or death. Tonight, you kept it to hands and buckets. You did well, but not perfectly, because one guest, the one with the fox fur mantle, left early. Her slippers were still visible as she crossed the threshold. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. And the lady, she hasn't returned from her chamber. You direct clean-up. You smile. You control the room like a slowly healing wound. But inside, you're already reviewing. Who placed that candle? Was the table waxed too recently? Was the wine cloth soaked and left too long? Was it the wind? A trick? A message? You circle the memory again and again, like a hound on a scent. Because tonight was saved. Barely. And next time, what happens when the fire burns longer than the servant's silence, or your reflexes? You'd hoped the night would bury the fire, that the silence of stone and sleep would seal it into memory. But come morning, it rises again, not in flame, but in suspicion. Word spreads fast through old walls. Before the dew dries on the straw by the stables, whispers are already creeping from scullery to stairwell. The cloth was too dry, the wax too close, the butler too slow. And now, the Lord wants answers, not guesses, not shrugs, a name. You feel it before you're told. The air shifts. The pages avoid your gaze. The steward nods to you with more calculation than courtesy. Even the cook doesn't offer crust this morning. By mid-morning, you're called to the chapel cloister, a side wing reserved for quiet talks and quieter judgments. He's not there yet, but others are. Marjorie, arms crossed. Joan, eyes lowered. Will, pretending interest in the moss between stones. And Elspeth, her apron unusually clean, which always means she's preparing for dirt. The steward clears his throat. His lordship wishes for clarity before Vespers, he says, as though time makes guilt more visible. Someone must be responsible. You say nothing. They wait. And then she speaks. Marjorie, voice flat, no tremble, no performance. I saw him place the candle. The silence buckles. You turn to her, slowly. Her gaze meets yours, steady, unblinking. I told him the cloth was damp from earlier. He said it would dry. I went to fetch more fruit. When I returned, it was already smoking. Will shifts. Joan frowns. Elspeth says nothing. The steward looks to you. Is that true? You open your mouth, but the words come slow. Not because you're unsure, but because you've just stepped onto a floor without knowing where the cracks lie. You didn't place the candle, but you were there. You did inspect the cloth. You did nod. You didn't say no. And in a hall like this, silence is consent. You take a breath. The candle was stable when I passed it. The cloth had been replaced. There was no immediate danger. Marjorie speaks again. You waved the boy away when he brought sand earlier. Said it wasn't needed. That's true. And it wasn't. Then. But the words echo now like prophecy. You glance to Joan. Her brow knits, uncertain. Will avoids your eyes. Elspeth finally lifts her head, but she stays silent. which is worse than speaking. The steward folds his hands. Until we determine more, he says, we will act as if the account holds. Orders remain unchanged. That's not judgment, but it's not absolution either. It's placement, a quiet form of exile. You return to your tasks, but now your steps echo slightly louder. You feel the delay when doors open, the soft drop in volume when you enter a room. You're still the butler, in title, but titles rust faster than blades, and she walks freely now, as if she's tasted something bitter and liked it. You know you're being watched, by servants, by walls, by silence. You begin to retrace the morning. Who lit which taper? Where was the spilled wine? Who saw it truly? Because you didn't cause the fire, but you're being set alight, slowly. And the question now is not just about truth, it's about timing. How do you prove innocence in a house that's already moved on to guilt? You thought the fire was the danger, but in truth the smoke comes after. It coils not in the rafters, but in the corridors. It clings to the hems of conversation, to the glances exchanged near stairwells. It makes the air heavy, not with heat, but with judgment. The Lord hasn't called you yet, which is worse, because you know what comes next, the quiet trial, not in a court, not in front of judges with wigs and scrolls. Here, in the castle, justice is swifter, smaller, and far more personal. You've seen it happen, enough times to know the pattern. It begins with a question, not to you, but to others. The steward will ask the cook where the candles were stored. He'll ask the scullery boy when the cloth was placed. He'll ask the youngest maid who cleaned the table, and if her hands were dry or damp. Each answer isn't a blow, but enough of them together, they bruise. Testimony in a noble household is not about proof. It's about consistency, about the shape of a story that can be told by several mouths without tearing at the seams. In the eyes of your Lord, guilt is not a matter of what happened. It's a matter of who allowed it to happen. And that is where you stand. You remember the last inquiry, a broken goblet. No one saw it fall, but the boy who swept the floor said he found shards under the Lord's chair. The girl who washed the linens said she saw blood. The butler then, not you yet, was dismissed, not for breaking anything, but for not noticing the break. No one asked if the goblet had a crack, or if the dog had knocked it. They asked if the butler could be trusted with glass again. He wasn't. He left before dawn, with one bag and no blessing. In castles, truth isn't weighed. It's woven, like a tapestry. Loose threads get pulled. Missing patches get filled. And if your shape no longer fits the pattern, you are removed. You pace the gallery above the chapel now, the stone cool beneath your feet. Voices rise below, too distant to make out, but you know their rhythm. Someone is being asked to remember. Someone is choosing what not to recall. There are no written records, no seals, only memory, status, bias. You've done your best to remain above the fray, to be useful rather than liked. But now, usefulness is being measured in drops and candle stubs. And you know this much. If a nobleman accuses, the word carries weight. If a servant accuses, the word must echo. Marjorie's words echo. She's young, favoured, clever with her silence. She didn't accuse you of malice, only mistake. And that's enough. Mistakes in this household are often treated as intent. You stand now before the small chamber near the buttery, the one where servants are spoken to quietly before being dismissed loudly. Inside sits the steward, and the guest in plum, and, perhaps, the lady. They haven't called for you yet, but they will. And when they do, they won't ask you what happened. They'll ask, why it happened on your watch. Because in a world without formal courts, your gaze is your guilt, your silence is your sentence. And so you ask yourself now, what truth can you speak when the verdict was whispered before the question? The castle exhales. You feel it in the creak of beams, the dimming of torchlight, the hush that wraps the upper halls. Servants retreat like shadows, bells are stilled, and only the distant hoot of an owl pulses through the courtyard beyond the stone lattice. You're not dismissed yet, because your final duty awaits. The Lord's evening ritual. You stand outside his chamber, palms still faintly damp, tunic collar tight. The steward gave no word, no change in orders, which means proceed as always. The door opens with a groan, though you've oiled the hinges twice this month. Inside the air is thick, not unpleasant, just layered. Sandalwood from the small brazier near the hearth. Faint lavender from the lady's chamber, still clinging to the woven drapes. And beneath it, the unmistakable warmth of wool, worn leather, and a man who's ruled long enough to grow tired of noise. He sits at the low chair, half removed from his cloak. You help him peel it fully away, fold it over your arm with practiced fingers. His doublet is loosened, boots unlaced. You don't speak unless addressed. The rhythm is ancient, almost liturgical. A copper basin sits beside the bed, filled with warm water steeped with rosemary and thyme. You wash his hands, rough, heavy-knuckled, but steady. He says nothing as you do it. You dry them with linen, wrap his shoulders in a second tunic of night blue wool. His bed is turned down, fresh linens, warm stones beneath the sheets, pillow angled just so. A goblet of watered wine rests on the sideboard, untouched. He gestures toward the shutters. You move silently, securing them against the chill. The stars outside blink like distant signal fires, unreachable. And still, he doesn't speak, not until you bring the final item, the carved wooden box from the shelf. You open it carefully, revealing the comb of horn and the small vial of perfumed oil, mixed by the apothecary last Michaelmas. He takes them both, runs the comb through his hair, still thick, though greyed at the temples. The oil he rubs into his wrists, then hands the vial back. Only then does he break the silence. Tomorrow, he says, voice low, even. You wait. The feast of St. Edmund. Do you remember? You nod. You will ensure the silver is laid by second bell, that the banners are clean, that the west table is moved forward so the minstrels may play without echo. Another nod. The bishop may attend. This is new. He stands now, stretches once. Not the groan of age, but of anticipation. I want it perfect, he says, turning to face you fully. His gaze meets yours, not angry, not warm, just exact. No smoke, no clatter, no questions. You bow low. Yes, my lord. He studies you. A flicker, barely a wrinkle near his eye. Evening was handled. A pause. Do better tomorrow. You accept it. Not praise, not yet, but permission to try again. He steps toward the bed. The mattress creaks as he sinks into it. You lower the curtain gently, leaving just enough of a gap for breath. As you move toward the door, his voice follows. One more thing. You stop. If the fire had gone further, he says, not rising, I would have lost not just cloth, but face. You understand? I do. He nods once, then rolls away from the light. You close the door behind you. The corridor is cooler now, empty. You feel the ache in your legs, the weight behind your eyes. But there will be no sleep. Not yet. You must check the banners, the candlestocks, the kitchen storerooms, the placement of the dais chairs. Because tomorrow, the castle becomes theatre. and every error will be visible in torchlight. And you ask yourself, when all eyes turn to the feast, will yours still be trusted to watch the fire? You don't sleep, not tonight, because feast days are cruel to servants, generous to nobles, to guests, to priests with blessings and cooks with pride. But for you, they stretch the dark into a canvas of fire, sweat, and endless checking. And this one, the Feast of St. Edmund, is no small occasion. You begin just after midnight. The hall must be transformed again, but not like the dancing. This is ceremony, structure. Every table must be angled precisely to catch the morning light for the priest's entrance. The dais needs polishing. You start with the cloths. Linen, dyed a soft rust red with gold edging. Stitched last harvest by a travelling widow who traded sewing for safe lodging. The banners follow. You retrieve them from the oaken chest near the chapel. Heavy velvet, embroidered with the family crest, lion rampant in gold thread. The dust clings, stubborn. You brush them slowly, reverently, laying them across the benches until they're ready to be hoisted at dawn. Then the tableware, pewter plates, carved horn knives, wooden trenchers for bread, and, for the high table only, silver goblets. Not all matching. Some are heirlooms, others war gifts, and one, the Lord's favourite, has a dent from when his father threw it at a bishop. You polish each one in silence, cloth damp with vinegar and salt. The kitchen, meanwhile, is already roaring. You step through briefly, just to check, and are hit with a wall of smell. Roasting fowl, spiced leeks, apples stewed in honey and cloves. Elspeth is barking orders with a spoon in one hand and a trussed capon in the other. The pastry girl is weaving dough into intricate braids. The oven boys sweat like cattle. Back in the hall, the candles are trimmed and fresh wax poured into the sconces. You place them one by one, 47 in total, all to be lit by second bell, and flowers, not for scent, too overpowering in an enclosed hall, but for colour. Late autumn blooms, marigold, fennel, dried rose hips, sprigs of pine. You arrange them at the base of the columns and beneath the window ledges, just enough to whisper festivity, not enough to look desperate. Then the scroll. You unroll the parchment left by the steward. Seating chart, order of service, names of honoured guests. The bishop will attend, and 3 knights from the neighbouring fief, one of them known for asking impertinent questions, another for spilling wine on tunics and blaming the help. You adjust the Lord's chair again, half a thumb closer to the centre. It must seem effortless, authority disguised as ease. The sun has not yet risen, but the crows are already arguing in the orchard. You rinse your face with cold water from the jug near the door. Your reflection blinks back, tired, drawn, alert. You take one final walk. The flags are hung. The cloths are smooth. The firewood is stacked. The wine barrels are tapped. And the morning bells begin to stir, tolling soft through stone and silence. This will be no ordinary feast, because it's not just bread and song. It's reputation, it's loyalty, it's memory. You've done all you can. But in a castle this size, one loose thread unravels everything. And you wonder, with every plate polished and every candle trimmed, what detail have you missed? You thought the hardest part was over. But the sun rises, and everything begins to fall apart. The kitchen is late, not just behind, silent. When you arrive, there's no hiss of boiling pots, no shouted orders, no heat. The hearth is cold, and the cauldron hangs dry. Elspeth stands with her hands folded tight, jaw set like stone. The cook's apron is stained, but nothing has touched the flames. The scullery boy leans against the doorframe, arms crossed. eyes low. No one speaks. You step into the room fully. Why are the fires not lit? No answer. Elspeth. Her gaze meets yours. Flat, tired. No flour, no onions, no salt pork, no beer. You blink. The deliveries, she cuts you off, didn't come. You glance toward the stores. You checked them yourself not 12 hours ago. Shelves full, barrels sealed, ropes coiled neatly. Now, the root bins are empty. The salted meat hooks hang bare. The casks of ale, still sealed, are suspiciously light. You step forward, wrench one open. Water. Nothing but water. You turn slowly, the weight of it sinking into your stomach like stone into wet earth. Elspeth, you say again, quieter. What happened? She shrugs. Ask the steward. You do. He's not there. Neither is the youngest page, nor the man who delivered the ale yesterday. You check the back gate. The bolt is slid back. The mud is disturbed. Footprints, drag marks, small scuffs in the frost. Someone left in the night. Several someones. You round the east wing in haste. The laundry maid pauses at your expression. The torch boy stops stacking firewood. In the hall, the cloths are still clean. The chairs still gleam. But they mean nothing now, because your kitchen has no food. And your people, they've stopped listening. The bread maid sits on the steps near the cistern, head in her hands. They're tired, she murmurs when you ask. Tired of being fed last. Tired of the bishop's boys sneering. Tired of you walking past without seeing. You swallow hard. You didn't walk past. You watched. You counted. You planned. But maybe that wasn't enough. Not this time. The sun climbs higher. The bells toll once, then again. Soon it'll be third bell, the moment of procession, when the guests will sit, and the Lord will rise, and the plates will be expected. But there's nothing to serve. No pastry, no meat, no honeyed fruit, only bitter water and missing crates. You make a choice. You gather the stable hands, the footmen, the two youngest stewards still loyal enough to follow. You split tasks, send for eggs from the village, borrow grain from the mill, offer coin from your own purse. One of the maids offers her ring, thin brass, but real. You race time, you barter, you bribe, you promise favors you'll never collect. And still the tables stay empty. Then comes the blow you didn't expect. You return to the pantry. One last check, one last prayer for overlooked stores, and find the side door cracked open. Inside, the smell hits first. Spilled grain, sour beer, and something faintly sharp, cheese gone to ruin. Then you see it. Smashed crates, broken jugs. One torn sack flutters in the draught like a flag, and footprints, leading away, small, light, but deliberate. You kneel, touch the grain-stained stone. It wasn't just a delivery that never came. It was taken, from the inside. And just as your breath stills, you hear movement in the dark alcove behind the wine shelves. Not rats, not ghosts. You stand slowly, heart thudding, because someone is still here, watching. And you whisper, who stole the feast, and why? You stay still for a long moment. Whoever was in the alcove has gone, or blended back into the bones of the castle. No one leaves obvious footprints now, not when they know the floors better than the steward himself. So you stand there, in the empty pantry, surrounded by proof not just of theft, but of message. Because theft here is never just hunger, it's defiance. And you've seen it before, not just today. You remember old Gerwin, once a baker's hand, turned hall steward. He stole ink, not wine, not coin, ink, poured it into the Lord's account book, blurred the numbers, doctored the debts. When caught, he didn't weep. He shrugged and said, if your pen can erase a man's bread, then mine can erase your coin. He was whipped, quietly, behind the stables, not for what he took, but for what he meant, because theft among servants wasn't just a crime of hand. It was a crime of place. You weren't punished for stealing. You were punished for stepping out of the role assigned to you. But roles stretch thin, especially when the bread thins faster. Salaries, if they could be called that, were seldom fair. A chambermaid might work 12 hours and earn enough for half a woolen shawl by winter's end. A stable boy might share boots with his brother. A kitchen girl might go 2 days with only broth and crust, while a visiting knight let his plate be cleared untouched. And what then? Theft becomes breath. It starts small, a scrap of cheese, an apple tucked under a hem, a stub of candle shaved low and wrapped in cloth. No one speaks of it. No one stops it. It is not a matter of rebellion, only gravity. Then it grows. The deliveryman holds back a crate and trades it outside the gate. A page boy delivers a letter late in exchange for an extra turn with the minstrels. A maid lifts a ring from a drunk guest and claims it rolled beneath the rushes. Everyone looks the other way, until one doesn't. And then punishment arrives, swift, hard, loud. Stocks in the square, whipping posts, dismissal without reference. Sometimes, if the Lord is merciful, just exile. But the worst punishment isn't pain. It's silence, being unseen, unneeded, unremembered. And you, standing now in the pantry's hush, know what it means to be blamed when systems fail. The hierarchy isn't just about obedience. It's about preservation. The Lord must appear just. The feast must appear full. And the guilt must fall somewhere below the tablecloth. Even if the cause was deeper. Even if it was, as you suspect now, provoked. After all, this castle has not raised wages in 3 winters. The grain rations were halved last Lent, and when the cook begged for 2 more hands before the holy days, the steward said, "Let them run faster." So they did, out the gate, with the food. You sit now on the edge of the cold pantry threshold. Your knees ache, your hands smell of dry grain and frustration. Someone took what they were never going to be given, and now the feast is broken. But the system that broke it, still intact. And as you rise to your feet and hear the bells call for preparation, you wonder, if you were born 1 rung lower, would you have stolen too? The trail ends in the west tower. Old stone, barely used, mostly storage and pigeons. You follow the faint scrape marks up the stairs, heartbeat steady now, not with fear, but a kind of cold necessity. He's there, Rory, the page, curled on a half-empty grain sack, holding a small bundle, dried apples, a piece of cheese, a ring of sausage wrapped in cloth. He looks up, pale, not guilty, not angry, just empty. "I wasn't going to eat it," he says. "Just keep it." You kneel slowly, not speaking. He shifts. "They were going to send me away. Said I was too old for a page, too slow for the stable. Said I could try the mines." The mines. The word lands like wet stone in your chest. You've heard what happens to those who go. You look at the food. It's hardly worth notice. Just scraps. But symbolic. Enough to spark fury. Enough to shift blame. You take the cloth from his hand. Not roughly. Just firmly. He doesn't resist. You stand. Then offer him your palm. He hesitates. Then places his in yours. By the time you return to the main hall, the banners are swaying with late morning light. The last garlands are in place. The kitchen hums, not in glory, but in effort. Somehow enough food has been gathered. Not lavish, but presentable. Bartered from neighbours, borrowed from the abbey. Some pies made from yesterday's leftovers, cleverly sliced and reheated. The servers stand in line. You give Rory a tray. He holds it with both hands, eyes wide, shoulders high. The bishop arrives, robed in green and gold. The hall fills. You watch from the shadows, mouth dry, knees threatening to give. The Lord's seat is filled. The music begins. And for one brief, impossible moment, you did it. A disaster dodged. A feast, however dented, still stands. You exhale, not from joy, not from pride, just from the weight finally slipping. Your hands tremble. The chair behind the curtain, your momentary refuge, calls you. You sit, body folding in slow collapse. Your eyes blur. And then a bell. Not the chapel, not the meal. A bell you know too well. A page rounds the corner, breathless. His lordship calls you, he says, voice quick. At once. You straighten, bones cracking, mind groggy. Why? The boy shrugs. Didn't say. You rise, too slowly, too stiff, and your thoughts begin to spiral. Did he notice the bread, the delay, Rory, or is it something worse? You walk the long corridor toward the solar. Footsteps hushed on rush-covered stone. The light outside has softened to gold. That brief autumn hush before the sun dips for real. Candles flicker in their sconces, whispering along the walls. You're tired, truly. Not just in your legs or your back, but deeper. The kind of tired that seeps beneath your bones and curls somewhere quiet. The page opens the door. Your lord stands by the fire alone. No steward, no chaplain, no record book, just him. Robes changed, hair brushed, a single cup in his hand. Not wine, broth maybe. His version of comfort. He turns. His face, unreadable at first, softens just slightly. You held it together. Not praise, not quite, but something close. You incline your head. We did our duty, my lord. He nods, slowly. Your hand with the silver was seen, he says. The bishop asked whose polish left no streak. Your mouth twitches, almost a smile. He steps forward, reaches into the folds of his robe, and pulls free a small pouch, tied in red string, heavy with coin. He places it into your palm. Take it, for the trouble. You don't protest. You've learned over years when refusal is noble, and when it's foolish. He sits, and the moment ends. You leave without another word. The hall is empty now, trays cleared, flags still hanging, catching the last of the firelight. You find your small chamber, the one behind the east kitchen wall. It smells faintly of soap and ash. Your mat is crooked, your blanket thin but clean. A single wooden spoon rests beside the door. You lie down. Every inch of you sings in relief. Your hands are rough, your nails still dark at the edges. You smell of beeswax and flour, smoke and broth, rushes and effort. And you are home. You close your eyes. You think of Rory, asleep somewhere nearby. Of Elspeth, grumbling over tomorrow's rations. Of the Lord sipping silent gratitude. You think of nothing, and then everything, and then nothing again. Because tomorrow it will begin once more. The bells, the cloths, the fire, the tray. But for now, for this 1 hour, there is no call, no summons, no knock. Only your breath, only the slow weight of sleep, and the stillness of a job finished, a life survived, a feast served.